Today, I'm walking the High Line, which is basically a park in New York City that starts on West 34th Street and 12th Avenue and goes down all the way to Washington Street and Gansevoort Street, which used to be a railway in the city before it got replaced with this park. So we're starting on 11th and 30th because the entrance on 34th was closed for some reason. But anyway, we're gonna walk the entire thing, so follow along. Little fun fact, out of the millions of people who walk the High Line every year, about 80% of them are tourists. Much to the annoyance, I'm sure, of the people who actually live in this area.
That would mean, I mean, he said that the entire,
Now the whole thing is 1.45 miles long, and for my European friends, that's 2.33 kilometers. And originally there was a street level railroad that was built in the 19th century, but then on certain parts of 10th and 11th Avenues, so many people died that those parts became known as Death Avenue. So much better times today than in this part of New York. And if you look behind me, you can see there's some really cool like buildings and housing units that are like by the High Line. Now, going back into some history of it, in 1929, the West Side Improvement Project decided that they didn't want the railroads on the street levels anymore, basically because of how dangerous it was. So they decided to elevate them. And this one actually became one of those elevated rail tracks, and it opened up in 1934. And that railway, this High Line, is 30 feet above street level. And if you look down, it looks like this might actually even be like a leftover rail from when the cargo trains were running here. Now you're probably wondering, at which point did railroads stop being on the High Line? And the answer is in 1980, because when trucks started competing with the cargo trains that were using these railroad lines, well, nobody wanted to use those cargo trains anymore. And so in 1980, the very last train ran on this railroad, which supposedly carried a bunch of frozen turkeys, probably for somebody's Thanksgiving dinner. That's neat. That's an actual rail line.
I think it is because, like, if you ever driven there.
Yeah, these apartments are real rad. I don't know how I'd feel about living in one of these apartments, though. Always seeing tourists walking around and watching you get busy. Because most of these, well, no, they've got these really interesting shutters. So the windows are all at these funky angles, but they have shutters and stuff that basically, close down vertically. But then maybe this apartment has some exhibitionists that don't care about the tourists who look inside. And a group of girls just agreed with me that imagine living there and having everybody watching you inside. But I think if you're keeping your blinds up, you probably are just like into that sort of a thing. Now you probably have one more question, which is, at which point did the railroad turn into this park? And the answer is in 1999. In 1999, they wanted to demolish it, but a group of members of the community called, what was it called? Community of the High Line? I don't remember. Let's check it. It was called Friends of the High Line. They decided to turn it into a park. So they began the work in 2006, and finally the last phase of the whole thing was completed in 2014. One more thing you may have noticed is there's a lot of vegetation that looks like, I don't know, it's very dry, it's not very green, but that's just because it's winter. In actuality, when it's not winter, it's much prettier. Maybe I'll do a walkthrough in the summer. And there are over 120 different species of plants that are on the High Line. And just like the original railroad that was here, the High Line goes under Chelsea Market, which is a huge, nice market full of good food in Lower Manhattan. And if you want, you can chill on one of these, I don't know, wooden beach chair looking things, although I can't say that they look too comfortable. I don't know if I could recommend them. I stand by my statement. They're not particularly comfortable. And here, if you check this out, Friends of the High Line, which was the group that was responsible for, preserving this and turning the railroad into the park. And now it appears as though we are reaching the end of the High Line. Doesn't look like there's very much left. I think it's super cool that they've kept so many parts of the rail line, that you can see as you're walking through the park. Okay, this is officially the end of the road, or end of the High Line. There are 20-something exits and entrances on the High Line, and this one's ours. So, see you next time.